is a Gettysburg College alumni where he studied economics, and now he's a certified financial planner at Quaker Wealth Management. So I wanted to ask some questions not only about Quaker and what you guys do now, but a little bit about your past and how college shaped your career trajectory. So a question I have is, how did your career aspirations change as you progressed through college?
Yeah, my story was a little unique. Though I am finding that in talking to other financial advisors, some have similar stories to mine, which is I started in college with my mindset on being a physical therapist of all things. So I started off as a bio major and I realized I wasn't very good at it when I took my first biology course in college. And I always say, luckily, Gettysburg was a liberal arts school, so you kind of had to, you were forced to do a little bit of everything, and that included for me economics. And so I connected with me. I was good at it, and so I started to pursue that as my primary degree. And so I ended up coming out of Gettysburg with an economics degree and a love for finance and personal finance, and that started my path towards where I am today.
That's honestly a story that I've heard from more than just yourself about going into something completely different. And then you take the first class and you're like, oh, I hate it. That totally happened to me too. I took my first chemistry class at Stony Brook University, and, I could bear through it. But then once I actually got into a finance class, I was like, oh, this is what I like. And, totally just transitioning from there. So it's not an uncommon thing at all to happen. So what was your first job out of college, and how has that shaped your career trajectory as you've gone forward?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I came out of college in the spring of 2001. And for some reason thought I deserved the summer off, which I definitely didn't. So took the summer off, but that's when 9/11 happened, right? So that's September that year. And so really, there was kind of a freeze in hiring. So I was stuck. And so I kind of sent my resume out to everybody, made phone calls, and one of the larger financial planning firms at the time, which is American Express Financial Advisors, ended up taking me on. And I don't know if you're familiar with how those work, but they kind of bring in classes of financial advisors. They train you, they support you while you get your licensing, and then they see who sticks, a year later. And fortunately, I was one of the ones that stuck. What I learned pretty quickly was it's at least the way it was when you started as a financial advisor back then, it was tough. It was pretty much cold calling people and sitting in a phone bank for hours on end, and including weekends. And so you got a sense of what really hard work was in the beginning. That was probably one of the positive things. And one of the things that I took away from that is I hated calling people on the phone. And so I would find any other way of acquiring a client that I could that didn't involve picking up the phone for hours on end. So I got pretty good at self-promoting and marketing early on as a result of that. I'm not sure my managers loved it at that time, the way I was doing things, but because I wasn't following their script. But I learned what not to do or what I didn't want to do from a marketing standpoint as an advisor. But I did learn a lot about the industry. I think to say something good about American Express Financial Advisors is they had a really good trading platform. And I don't think a lot of firms were really specialized in financial planning back then. And so I did learn a lot about a lot. And that was a good springboard, I think, to my next step in my career.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I've heard a lot of good things about American Express. It's actually interesting because they're Ameriprise now, and Ameriprise is pretty prominent all over the country. I'm actually working for a subsidiary of Ameriprise this summer. So it's like, I remember, when I realized that American Express and Ameriprise were the same thing, it was definitely really cool to see that same type of training that you guys got, it still exists in a certain way, just not in necessarily the same way that you got it back then, which I think is awesome. So I did a little research and I was looking at your guys' website and stuff, and I got to read your guys' retirement guide, and I had a few questions. So, what aspect of retirement planning do you think is often most neglected?
Yeah, there's probably quite a few. I mean, the most obvious ones that we see are that folks will underassume their expenses in retirement for sure. Um, most people have more time in retirement if they're not working anymore, more time to spend money essentially. And so the lifestyle that you're carrying pre-retirement is not going to be the same lifestyle you carry post-retirement. And so if anything, expenses go up. That's just normal living expenses. And then, but I would also say medical expenses go up too. So you're used to having, most folks that work for a larger company would have their healthcare benefits provided through them. And now they're on their own. They're through Medicare now and some out-of-pocket expenses. So that's not often assumed in long-term plans. And that can be a big cost over time. So I think expenses for sure are the big one that we see often, that people are shocked at what we're assuming their expenses will be in retirement and how that grows over time and through inflation, that sort of thing. Yeah.
So I recently learned about the 3 bucket strategy when it comes to retirement distribution, and it kind of sparks my interest in this question. So do you guys prepare people in that type of strategy, or do you guys have your own type of system, to analyze expenses and then also distribute your retirement your investments at the right pace to make sure that you don't necessarily take the damage of market downturns and things that necessarily wouldn't help your portfolio?
Yeah, it's a great question. So yeah, we do have kind of a buckets approach. I think the buckets approach is more of a way of explaining things in practical terms in retirement. It is a strategy too, for sure, but I think there's a semi-bucket approach at all times for all investment strategies, even if you're younger and more aggressive. And that is, we certainly expand that first bucket, which is probably the cash bucket, what you're referencing there.
Yes.
That has almost zero chance of loss, right? It's always going to be there no matter what, FDIC insured. And the second bucket being your income bucket, and then third being growth, right? So yeah, we employ the same type of strategy, and depending upon the risk level of the client, that cash bucket might expand or not. Same thing with the income bucket. And yeah, that all filters through to how efficiently can you can you fill up that first bucket over time, right? That keep that cash bucket filled, so to speak. And that goes to withdrawal rate. So what percentage of your portfolio are you drawing down on an annual basis? And is that a sustainable withdrawal rate? And that the old adage of the 4% rule, it's probably more applicable today with where interest rates are, but it wasn't applicable 2 years ago when interest rates were much lower. And so it's contingent upon the current economic environment, what that withdrawal rate or a good or healthy withdrawal rate is. And so our review meetings that we have with clients all the time, especially those that are retired, we're always going through that withdrawal rate and saying, where are we from a stress level in the portfolio as a result of your withdrawals this past year. And we do it in a non-judgmental way, right? Some people have large expenses some years and lower expenses other years. We're just trying to get a kind of a baseline on the health of their withdrawal strategy and ours.
Yeah. So I was actually reading a book last night when I was thinking about this, and it really opened my mind to you have to plan very meticulously in the accumulation phase, if we refer to it as that, when you're really getting income and you're working, so that you have enough money, they're in the right accounts. All your expenses are taken care of for retirement. But I think an underappreciated part of financial planning is planning the distributions, like we're talking about right now. To be able to, if you retire at 65 and, God bless you, live to 100, that's 35 years of making that money stretch. If you were to not work again, that definitely takes as much detail and planning as the accumulation phase. So how important do you think is planning for that distribution phase towards the end of retirement, and not just accumulating and making sure that your clients have it once they retire?
Yeah, that's a great question. If you're in a place where you have too much money, congratulations, right? Most people aren't in that situation. So they have to be, that's what proper planning is, right? It's saying, here's our current expenses, here's how it's going to change in retirement. Do I have a pension? What can I count on from a Social Security standpoint for myself and my spouse? How does that carry forward with cost of living adjustments over time? And then what do we need in excess of that new base salary in retirement from our investable assets on an ongoing basis? And then where do we take it from, right? Is it a non-qualified or standard brokerage account first? Is it your IRAs? Is it your Roth IRAs? Is it some combination of that? And everybody doesn't have the same answer, right? So it's dependent on tax rates and liquidity and things of that nature. So that's why financial planning becomes so important, is that there isn't a one size fits all for most people. There really is personalized planning that goes into these into these withdrawal strategies in the future, and accumulation strategies as well. So we try to also position on the accumulation side. We call it tax diversification, which is, do you have multiple channels to draw from in retirement in case or when tax laws change, right? So can you shift your strategy to drawing down on taxable assets in a particular year versus non-taxable assets like a Roth IRA? So having that flexibility in retirement as a result of planning during the accumulation phase is super important.
Yeah, I really like the idea of like the fully comprehensive financial plan in both accumulation and distribution. And I think that's really important. And I feel like I undervalued it. And now that I'm understanding how important that distribution phase is, I love to hear that you guys are completely on board with the same ideology and making sure that people's expenses are taken care of. And like you said, there's no two people that have the same level of expenses or income. So it's completely unique when you come to planning each individual client, which is awesome. So I just want to ask a little bit about your guys' firm when it comes to client growth. So there's so many different ways that you guys can bring in clients, whether that be referrals or marketing, paid advertisement. So how does your firm drive new client growth?
Yeah, at this point, we're pretty much word of mouth from our existing clients. If I was sitting here 20 years ago and heard myself saying that, I probably wouldn't believe it. But look, if we really like our clients and we have really good relationships with them, so it's only practical that we'd want to work with people that are just like them, and that's usually their friends or family, coworkers. And so we don't push referrals. We don't ask ongoing. It's probably against what my American Express financial advisor manager taught me all those years ago. But we look at it as, if we deliver really high quality service and really personalized advice, that when those conversations come up naturally, that they'll refer them to us. And so most of our new clients come from existing clients. We also have some good relationships with local CPAs and estate attorneys that have been accustomed to our work. And if they're looking for hopefully what they think is a high quality financial advisor for their clients, they think of us as well. So that's another source. We do a little bit of advertising, but mostly locally to where we are in Morristown, New Jersey, South Jersey. And that's more in the community. So we're not, we sponsor a lot of events in the community. We support some local charities in the community, but we don't try to monetize that or quantify it in any way from a client standpoint. It's more about us giving back in the communities in which we live and our clients live. There probably is some marketing tangential benefit to that, but we don't try to quantify that.
I love your guys' emphasis on organic growth. And if you actually provide a great service, that the growth will come with you. You know, I love how you said that you want to work with clients that, you know, are just like your clients because you love working with them. So that same network, if you're working on mostly word of mouth, you're going to end up with the same type of clientele, which I think is awesome and, you know, beneficial to both you because you get to bring in more clients that are easy to work with and, you know, actually beneficial to yourself. And then the client itself gets a highly personalized, you know, high level experience. And that's what they're referring. So I think it's a great, you know, mutually beneficial relationship that you guys have working on. And
yeah, appreciate that.
So I was looking at the website last night and I wanted to ask you about the family CFO service. So what is the family CFO service and how does it differ from traditional financial planning?
Yeah, so we created that last year. We found that there was a gap in what financial advisors were providing to their clients at a higher level. So I guess in a normal sense, if we had a client who needed their estate documents done or asked us about an accountant or CPA that we knew, we would refer out and let them drive those conversations with the estate attorneys and CPAs. This is us doing all that, the steering of the ship, essentially. So we Recently, we did a search for a CPA for a client. He gave us, husband and wife gave us the criteria. Those types of CPAs they didn't want, those that they did want, and the complexity of their situation we already knew inside and out. And so we went out and sourced, they don't live in state here in our state, live out elsewhere. So we went out and sourced a handful of CPAs. We interviewed them personally. We got them down to 2 or 3 we really liked, brought the clients in on those conversations, and then chose the final CPA based on that. And so we do most of that legwork there. And we really are the quarterback of our client's financial situation in most facets of finance at that point in time. In that service, we ask or almost require that the CPA or state attorney are involved in at least one meeting per year with us. We cover a certain number of those expenses at a firm level. Doesn't get passed through to the client. And just so we're being proactive from that standpoint. And it holds us and the client and the CPA, the state attorneys accountable to the client over time. And at the end of the day, we're a fiduciary firm, and that's what we set out to do. So that was the genesis of why we created that service. It's not right for everybody, but for somebody who has a little bit more of a complex situation and is busy living their lives elsewhere and working or enjoying, that can be a really good way to make sure that all your I's are dotted and T's are crossed from a financial standpoint.
It seems like a great comprehensive financial planning service that's a little more in depth for the clients that just want a completely hands-off approach. And I'm sure that not every client is interested in that, but I'm sure there's a big portion of people that would definitely be interested in that if the money makes sense for them, which I think is a great opportunity to be able to capitalize on. There is going to be some people that just want to completely nothing to do with it, not to have to think about their finances, and you just be their money guy and just do what you got to do. Don't let me know. I just want to know if I can buy this new car or whatever it may be. But so I think that's a really cool service that you guys are providing. And then a question I had also was, there's the rise between assets under management and fee-based financial planning. So as a financial planner now, you get to see what clients are more in tuned to, pricing structure wise. Do you feel like there's one that's going to be more popular in the future between fee-based and assets management, or do you think that maybe there's a place for both, or one will be completely phased out? How do you think that that's going to change in the future?
Yeah, it will without a doubt change. I mean, that's the reality of our industry, right? When I started out, it was all commission based, mutual fund, A shares, getting a commission up front. And that obviously shifted to assets under management and more of a fee-based approach. So it'll always be a little bit of everything, but there's always going to be these shifts here and there. I think at the end of the day, and that'll be driven either by our regulatory agencies, SEC, FINRA, that sort of thing, or by demand, right? So ultimately the client's going to decide what's in their best interest. So I think right now we're AUM, right? So we're fees based on assets under management for the most part. We have a few legacy financial planning, which is annual planning fee clients, but for the most part we're AUM based. We've had ideas internally. I think I might have mentioned this when we took our first go around at this, to build out kind of a subscription based service that wouldn't be contingent upon assets under management. But honestly, the scale to scale that up would be pretty daunting from where we are currently at our firm. So I think I see that. I try to keep a pretty good pulse in the industry, so I see that moving in that direction ultimately, because I think a lot of younger folks are acclimated to that setup, that kind of monthly payment thing. But I don't think it's going to change quickly. So it's like anything, it's going to take time. And there's plenty of business types and client types where there's going to be a match no matter what. So I think people have to be more creative moving forward with their fee structures. I think fees are going to be condensed over time. So you'll have to deliver more value for a lower fee, essentially. That's already happened in our industry. But we've always kind of been positioned as a firm to be a lower cost option, and then hopefully over deliver from a value standpoint. And then we grow through referrals as opposed to trying to increase fees on our clients.
That's a great mindset to have, to be able to really deliver that value, and that's where you guys are trying to make your living from. I think that's more beneficial to the clients, and it benefits you overall in the long run anyway. So I appreciate that insight on the
I was going to
trajectory.
ask you, Ryan, since you are the younger generation, taking a look at this from an outside perspective, just kind of getting your feet wet. How do you see these going?
It's a good question. I have the rationalization in my head where the fee base sounds like, oh, you're not taking a portion of my portfolio, but then it's also like, well, now I got to pay a fee flat, like, on the front end, almost like you mentioned the Class A shares. So I think it's a weird balance that, like, I don't necessarily know which one I would prefer. I think there's going to be a place for both. That maybe it would be an option based on the client's preference, or things like your family CFO service, where there's, like, maybe a monetary fee for certain packages. And then I heard of someone recently that was doing, like, yearly engagements of, like, a monthly fee. So, like, you
Okay.
were locked in for a year and you had to pay them over the course of, like, once a month, which was interesting to think about too. Um, so I really don't know. It seems like fee base is where the industry is going, from the insight that I've been given from professionals. But it's going to be interesting to see. I definitely see, like, a pendulum that maybe we're swinging in one direction, and then in 20 years we might be swinging back to how it is now. It's going to be interesting to ride out for sure.
Yeah. I always say it's slow moving because it's if you think about the powers that be that kind of operate in this industry, right? All the large investment banks that are essentially structured as an AUM strategy, AUM revenue strategy. For them to shift in totality someplace else would take a really long time and a concerted effort to do so. And so if they're still at the top, then they're the ones that are ultimately going to shift the majority of the industry, whether you like that or not. That's just kind of how it operates. So that's why I say any major shift would take some time. That pendulum would take a number of years to swing for sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So a final question I have is, Youth Leaders is dedicated to helping the next generation of wealth management professionals, people like myself that are interested in getting into the field. We don't necessarily have the proper guidance in school, or just a lack of information on, getting a successful career in the industry. So what would be your advice to the upcoming generation of wealth management professionals?
Yeah, it's a tough question, and it's a great question. I think that there's value in these large firms, right? For the same reason that I appreciated the training platform that American Express provided me. I learned a lot of stuff really quickly. Did it all stick? No, because you have to be practicing and using that knowledge for it to stick ultimately. And so I think there's, if I had to start over today and I knew what I know today, I would try to kind of get into a smaller firm or a smaller subset of a firm, kind of like it sounds like you're trying to do there, Ryan. And have real life interactions with clients or the financial planning process, be in on those strategy meetings. That's how you truly learn, I think. And if you are trying to become a really good financial advisor, learning why a strategy makes sense or why another one doesn't is ultimately the best training ground you could have. So it's finding those smaller firms that are willing to bring you in on into this conversation. I think is really important. And then I would think just some basic reading would be good. There's such great material out there, and obviously YouTube and some great online resources. I mean, The Psychology of Money by Morgan Housel is a game changer. You're nodding your head, so you've probably read that.
Yeah.
Because everything that we do as humans are psychology based, right? From money to survival to bringing kids up, that sort of thing. So it's a great way of getting a sense of how most people are thinking, and that's a great way to have deep, meaningful conversations with clients. And at the end of the day, that's what I think most people are seeking, is somebody who knows what they're talking about, who's willing to continue their education, and but is also willing to get to know the client on a personal level, so they understand what makes them tick financially. I think it's a great book. It should be on everyone's reading list. that wants to get in the industry.
Yeah, I actually just gave that book to my roommate to read over because I'm like, this is one of the best, books I've ever read because the combination of psychology and money, as the title says, is just, it's in everything that we do, all our decisions, it's totally overlapping. So I would definitely recommend to read that, but I
Yeah,
appreciate
it
your
feels like
insight.
it feels like every line in that book is quotable. It's just
Absolutely.
jam
Yeah.
packed. It's a great, and he has a new book now too. It's sitting on my desk here, but I haven't read it yet. But anyway,
What's the name of the new one?
you know what? I don't. It's sitting behind the monitor. I don't know the name of it. It's forgive me. You know what? We'll keep going, and I'll think of it.
All right. Yeah, I
Or I'll
appreciate it.
sneak over my
Yeah,
monitor here.
I'm definitely putting that on my reading list for sure because Morgan Housel is great.
Yeah,
But I
fantastic.
appreciate you coming on. I really thank you for doing everything and giving us some real insight onto your guys' firm, your career trajectory, and where we think the industry is going. And I look forward to continuing our relationship, and hopefully we can reconvene as times have changed, and then we can provide some more insight for everyone that's in youth leaders and wealth management.
Yeah, appreciate you having me, Ryan. And this was fun. And yeah, we should definitely do it again.
Awesome. Thank you so much.